Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Agriculture Rural Affairs Committee meeting. To my colleague, one of our colleagues sent his regret. His dad just passed away a couple of days ago. Councillor DeRoos will not be in the meeting today. Declaration of interest? None. Confirmation of minutes of February 22nd, 2019 of the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. On the minute? Okay, thank you. I'm going to go through consent agenda, but before we go through consent agenda, I'd like to read this statement. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendment listed as item 2 and 3 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submission today or written submission before the amendment are adopted may appeal the matter to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, formerly known as OMB. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal if Council does not adopt an amendment within 150 days of receipt of this application for zoning, 210 days for an official plan amendment. A comment sheet is available at the door for anyone wishing to submit a written comment on these amendments. And before I start the meeting, I'd like to welcome our new member, Councillor Caroline Meehan, and to Iraq. So looking forward to working with you. And she brought her audience with her. Item number 1. The Status Agriculture Rural Affairs Committee inquiries in motion for the period ending 25th February 2019. This is from the Office of the Clerk and Solicitor. On the item? Received. Thank you. Item number 2, we have item number 2 is zoning bylaw amendment, part of 7065 Snake Island Road in Ward 20, Osgood. That the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for a part of 7065 Snake Island Road for the purpose of rezoning a portion of the land from Agriculture Sub 2 to Agriculture Subzone 6 to prohibit residential uses on the retaining farmland and detail in document 2. And item number 2, the Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee approved this consultation detail. On this item? Okay. Item number 3 is a zoning bylaw amendment, part of 2596 Carp Road in West Carlton. So we do have a presentation first from our staff, and then we go to a list of speakers. I would like to ask Mr. Brown to do his presentation. And Sarah, I believe Sarah, the plan also. Kelly, can we dim the light a little bit? People see behind. Go ahead, Sarah.
Good morning. So this is a presentation for a zoning bylaw amendment application at 2596 Carp Road. So the subject property
Please speak to the mic.
is known municipally as 2596 Carp Road, which is identified in green on this map. And has frontage on both Carp Road to the west and Newell Place on the east. The zoning bylaw application requests to zone a portion of the property, which is shown in red on the location map, to accommodate the development of a concrete batching plant. The intent of the zoning bylaw amendment is to add a concrete batching plant as an additional permitted use on a portion of the subject property while maintaining the current rural general industrial zoning. The intent of the amendment is also to establish a permitted height of 24 meters in relation to the concrete batching plant. The property is located within the Carp Road corridor, which is designated a rural employment area in the City of Ottawa's official plan. This permits both light and heavy industrial uses. I've also identified the boundary of the urban area on this location map. There is an existing rural estate lot subdivision located at the east of the subject property, which is identified in green on the map. There is also additional existing residential development along Richardson Side Road to the south and on Oak Creek Road to the east, as well as in other rural estate lot subdivisions to the west, which is located on the far left-hand side of the image. There's additional light and heavy industrial uses that surround the site. So there are two existing industrial parks. There is a waste transfer facility that is located along Richardson Side Road, concrete forming business that fronts onto Carp Road, the Carson Quarry, and the West Carleton landfill. As per section 2.1 of the Carp Road Corridor Community Design Plan, there should be a gradual intensification of uses from the north at the Carp Airport to the south at Highway 417, transitioning through highway commercial, light industrial, and heavy industrial uses. There are other required approvals prior to development of the concrete batching plant. There is currently an ongoing site plan control application with the City of Ottawa. Through this application, we will be looking at impacts of traffic. This has been determined as there are many existing uses that are permitted under current zoning, which are similar in intensity in traffic counts. So therefore, it was more appropriate to deal with traffic concerns through the site plan control application. A permit to take water has been issued by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks on February 13th. There's also the need for an air, noise, and dust environmental compliance approval, which is currently under review by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. And there is also the requirement for a stormwater management environmental compliance approval, which has yet to be submitted to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. This type of environmental compliance approval is typically submitted at the end of a site plan control review. This application was subject to public circulation and public consultation. There was an information session held on November 21st, 2018, which was attended by Councillor El Shantiri, city staff, Kavanaugh, and their consultants. Concerns have been raised by the public. At the time of writing and preparation of the presentation, 32 comments were received. Additional comments have been submitted as well this past week. These concerns by the public generally fit into the following categories that are listed above: traffic, business hours, proximity and impacts on existing residential development, environmental impacts, and the provincial classification of the proposed industrial use. This is a draft bylaw amendment, shows what is being proposed through the zoning. Section Area A is where the concrete batching plant is being proposed. The zoning there would add a concrete batching plant as an additional permitted use to the existing RG5 zone, permit a maximum building height of 24 meters for the concrete batching plant, and provide a hold on the zoning, which could only be lifted once an air, noise, and dust ECA is obtained from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation, and Parks. Areas B, C, and D, which are all currently various zones, would be rezoned to open space in order to prohibit any future development. And it would add a special exception which would permit the existing building, which is located in that area, as an office for the concrete batching plant. I'm sorry, I don't understand which location. It's important to note that the portion of the property that is being rezoned to permit the concrete batching plant is located approximately 310 meters from the residential properties on Newell Place, with the physical location of the concrete batching plant being 360 meters from those residential properties, and that no change is proposed to the rural countryside zoning located adjacent to the residential development on Newell Place. In conclusion, the zoning bylaw amendment complies with the rural employment designation of the official plan, acts as a transition between heavy industrial and light industrial areas, maintains the light industrial nature of the Carp Road corridor while intensifying the interior of the lot, maintains the rural zoning adjacent to residential properties, and protects the Huntley Creek from future development through the open space zoning.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, for your presentation. To my colleague, we have a long list of presenters, so if we can go to the folks who registered to speak. If anyone wishes to speak and has not registered yet, please register with our staff. You're going to have 5 minutes to speak to the community, to the committee, and I'm going to let you know 30 seconds before, so we can wrap up, and you can stay if any of the committee members have a question for you. So with that, we're going to start with Judy Macon, Vice President of Huntley Community Association. And Judy, please speak directly to the mic, just like you are hugging the mic, so everyone can hear.
Testing. Does that work? As Councillor Eli El Shantiri has indicated, I'm representing the Huntley Community Association. You've received a message from myself yesterday. Yesterday morning, I know you had a very busy week this week, but we did outline the questions and concerns that the Community Association has for this development. We tried to summarize them. Our community association is based in the village of Carp, but we really do represent the entire sort of area that formerly was considered Huntley Township. This area is part of our area that we are concerned about. Carp Road is a major arterial road for not only the village of Carp, but most of Ward 5 would be using Carp Road as their main access to Highway 417, Canada, and Stittsville. Many of our residents are happily working in the Carp Road employment corridor, and that is no problem to any of us. To my knowledge, our community association has never appeared before you to object to any development application ever. This one is very different. That's why we're here today. We posted information on our website, in our newsletters. We've had interviews with the local paper, and we've posted things on our Facebook page because many questions are being raised by residents regarding this application. We've tried to keep residents informed. We've heard a considerable level of degree of concern about this. So I'm just going to try to summarize one important point first. And that's with regard to the Carp Road Corridor CDP. I gave you the link in my message yesterday. Our request is that you respect the intent of this plan. This plan was written back in 2004. It clearly outlines the areas where the community wishes heavy industry to be located versus light industry. It's very clear. There's a Schedule 1 where it's highlighted in different colors. Our local residents participated in this CDP process, as councillors want us to. And we're asking you to respect this plan. On the map at the end of my submission, you saw where 2596 Carp Road is located. It's superimposed on Schedule 1 of the CDP. You'll note that it's in the medium blue shaded area, which is light industry. The proponents identify this business as heavy industry, and appropriately so. The continued assertion by our city planners that this concrete batching plant, is in keeping with the intent of the Carp Road CDP. We just do not understand that, and we've been trying to inform ourselves and help you inform yourselves about how this happens. We feel the Tomlinson waste facility is not an appropriate comparison. It's light industry there. It's not the trucks coming and going full of cement. So we feel the CDP is crystal clear on where the industry should be located, and that we believe the line in the sand should be Richardson Side Road. For future development, the CDP directs future planners to consider, and I quote, "The uses permitted should be appropriately located and well designed to minimize nuisance and interference with existing or proposed uses of adjoining lands." So your question is this location appropriate? You would want to consider traffic in the environment. No amount of landscape buffering can mitigate a bad decision. With regard to traffic, we've requested a traffic study. I know our councillor Eli has requested a traffic study, and we don't understand why that isn't made available to you today to make this important decision. It's essential. 26 heavy cement and dump trucks turning per hour onto Carp Road is going to have a massive impact. This road at this location is very narrow. It does not meet...
I have 30 seconds left. So.
It probably doesn't meet current standards for a 2-lane road. There's no way this road could be widened. You couldn't add a turning lane at this point unless you're willing to expropriate businesses and one home. So the long-term costs, if you make this decision, are significant. Unless the road is widened, it will be a very dangerous intersection, and it's just an accident looking for a place to happen. There are many concerns about noise and air and water, and I'm sure my friends from the community are going to raise those with you.
Okay.
What we're asking is that you turn down this proposal today.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you for your service to our community as the Vice President of the Community Association. To my colleague, and a question to... Okay, thank you very much, Judy. The next presenter is Vino Shadari.
Good morning. Honorable Chairman and respected members of the committee. My name is Vinod Chaudhary, and I'm the resident of 111 Newell Place. That's the adjoining property to the proposed development.
Speak to...
Okay. Sorry, I have emphysema, so I can't speak much louder.
For the next budget, we approve a better sound system, but you have to bear with us.
I'll help you with
such
that.
a times.
So I'm one of the properties next to the proposed development. When we first came to know about it, as anybody here would do, you go on Google, you talk to your engineer friends, you check what information is out there, and try and see, is that going to be a good fit for you or not? Just 30 minutes of research is going to bring up points that are going to make you shake. Concrete batching plants are known to be noisy, dusty, and they are a traffic problem, big time. So we did some further research and we went and talked to the neighbors in Carlton Place where Kavanagh already has a concrete batching plant. Essentially the same idea, a couple of houses near the batching plant. So the feedback that we got from them, essentially the points that they wanted to tell, the points that they made to us was that they absolutely hate it. There's no timing. These plants can start 5 a.m. in the morning and can end 11 p.m. in the night. The night pours are far too often. This plant, I particularly believe, will not create any jobs that cannot be created otherwise. Being a businessman, having studied economics and management, I can tell you, this will actually hamper the future growth of that area just because of the bulkiness of the whole operation. I'm not an engineer. I don't know what's there in the report, what's not. But I do know that the reports are not very conclusive. In fact, most of the reports that we do have, most of the reports are still awaited. We do not have the TIA, we do not have environmental assessments, we have nothing. So we are just making a decision right now about a zoning change for which we do not have most of the information. Although the provincial ministry is responsible for it, but I think it's still important to have that information when we are making this decision right here. So the residents and other small businesses in the area will have their health and wealth impacted by this zoning change. And the applicant, when asked about the same thing, they are acting that it's not in their mandate and they're not supposed to be worried about the health part or the wealth part. They have to just adhere to the minimum parameters set up by the Ministry of Environment. The height of the proposed tower is 60% more than what is allowed. And in the report asking for the change, they say it's a slight variance from the original number. 60% and it's a slight variance. I personally think that the engineers writing those reports, they're trying to mislead the reader. What a shame. All the data we have and the research that we have done as a group is too exhaustive to be presented at this forum. But we have tried to outline the key points, and few of us will be getting into some details. Stantec reports claim in their rational report that it's in public interest to approve this project. I'm concerned that will Stantec tell the council now what public interest is. As I mentioned earlier, I myself have emphysema already. I moved here from New Delhi, trying to get a better life. And now it seems I'll have to run again. I will leave it up to you guys, sorry, respected members of the committee, to make a decision as whether residents take a precedence over businesses or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Veena. No questions for. Okay. The next delegate is Dan Mayo. Good morning, Mr. Mayo.
Good morning, Mr. Chantilly. My name is Dan Mayo. My wife, Sarah, and I are long-term residents of Oak Creek Road. Passing through our farm is a long stretch of beautiful Huntley Creek. First, let me congratulate Councillor Meehan for her courageous citizen editorial in January, calling for a pause on rapid suburban growth until public infrastructure catches up. The present zoning application is a dark symptom of the spin-offs resulting from too rapid growth. Your committee should not dismiss today's many sincere objections as mere not in my backyard NIMBYism. Our area already has plenty of unpleasant development nearby. South of Richardson Side Road, down Carp Road to the Queensway, we already have Carson's Large Quarry, West Carlton Concrete, MCon Precast, and the soon-to-expand Carp Dump. How many hits do we have to take for the team? Please don't allow more heavy industry to get ever closer. Please let Richardson Side Road be the red line. South heavy industry, north light. Your city planners do a lot of fancy footwork distinguishing this application from a normal heavy industry rezoning. Oh, they say it's only an amendment, not a rezoning. Oh, it's only an exception to a permitted use. It's only a site-specific part of the property. Please don't be taken in. These are distinctions without difference. It does not matter what label you apply. If that concrete plant goes in, the negative effects are all the same. Shakespeare's famous line is apt. What's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Here, a concrete plant by any other label will be as bad. Our city official plan contains many high-minded statements of principle about protecting the natural environment. Please don't degrade these principles to mere lip service. Your planners have badly let you down by not following these principles, and so the concrete plant does not conform to the official plan. Your planners show a reprehensible lack of due diligence on environmental concerns, and too much reliance is placed on the proponents' hired gun consultants, who of course don't see any problems. Why go to all the trouble to develop an official plan and the subsidiary zoning and community designs when ad hoc changes can be so easily made? I've written a limerick that illustrates this problem. The planners practiced ad hocery, making the plan a great mockery. They made their decisions with little precisions and wrote a report that was crockery.
Okay, Mr. Mayo, direct your presentation to the committee, because today it is about the committee. You're speaking to the committee.
Yes.
Okay, please.
I am. I'm criticizing your planners to you.
Criticize us, sir, because the report is up to us where we take it from here.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
The planners and the consultants have assured us of compliance with provincial standards about emissions, setbacks, water quality, and so forth. Please note, these are minimum standards. Can the city not show leadership and ask for higher standards? And shockingly, none of the consultants or the city staff say anything about stress testing these standards. What if there's accidents, spills, fires, explosions?
You have 30 seconds left, sir.
Or tornadoes? What if the proponent's machinery operates inefficiently or malfunctions before being fixed? Can this proponent be trusted as stewards of Huntley Creek with their level of environmental convictions? Your plan has also ignored the species at risk in Huntley Creek.
Can you please wrap up, sir?
Sorry?
Time is out. Can you wrap up?
Yes, I'm right, the last paragraph.
Okay.
There's redfin suckers, snapping turtles, blanding turtles, bobolinks, barn swallows, endangered butternut trees, they're all either in the creek or in its riparian zone. Last 2 points. No effort has been made to speak to the federal government about environmental concerns under their jurisdiction. This in a city with so much reliance on the national government for work and for funding. It's almost as if your planners want to sneak down the hall in their sock feet and hope no one notices.
Mr. Mayor,
My last point.
3 times your last point. So please.
Finally.
Okay.
Finally. The planners have shamefully ignored the express commitment in your official plan to engage the Algonquins about management of the Carp River watershed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next speaker, Mr. Demers, Mark Demers. Folks, you can save your clapping and your jeer. We're here respectfully listening to everyone's opinion. So please, no clapping and no jeering either. We're here respectfully, and please do not point the finger on staff. Staff prepared the report to the committee, and it's up to the committee today to make a decision. Mr. Demers, are you ready?
Plug it in when your technology catches up.
Are you ready, sir?
Yeah, I'm just opening the file there, sir.
Okay, start the clock.
Thanks, folks. So we have a whole bunch of materials that we wanted to share with you. Obviously, we have 5 minutes. I plan to be a rule follower and do that, so I'll be done in 5 minutes. These are a number of the topics that we'd like to go through. Your forum won't allow us the time to go through all of them. Sorry, is that not loud enough? Yeah, sure. So on a specific basis, I'm going to talk in detail about dust, but all of these other things are items that are of concern, and we'll follow up in other forums to address those. So what we're showing here is the impacts of dust. The left is a collapsing silo at a cement factory. On the right is actually, this is an advertisement from Kavanaugh's own page. If you read the reports that were filed with the city, and in this discussions made by Kavanaugh, they said repeatedly, there's no dust at our facility. We have water suppression, there's no dust. And yet they're bragging, look at that. I mean, they're bragging essentially about the amount of dust that they produce. I'm focusing here on the toxins in Portland cement. I'm going to go through some of the things that are in there, focus on one. I'm going to give you a definition of the by the PEO, what professional incompetence means in engineering, and then I'll jump into some of the impacts of that. So, in Portland cement, these are some of the compounds that you find in Portland cement. There's lead, there's nickel, there's cadmium, and there's hexavalent chromium. Those compounds, nickel, cadmium, alkaline materials, they're the reason why we're not allowed to put batteries in the landfills. They're heavy metals, they stay in the ecosystems forever, and they're all present. They're all present in Portland cement. If you go through the reports in detail, I'm not sure if you've all read all the reports, there's a lot of pages there, but there's some very clear omissions, misleading statements, and actual false information. This is the definition from the Professional Engineers of Ontario of what incompetence means. You can read it there. But basically, any engineer who has disregarded the public's welfare can have their license taken away. And I believe what's been demonstrated in these reports is the definition of incompetence. One of the compounds I mentioned is hexavalent chromium. I don't know if you've heard of it before. If you've ever heard of Aaron Brockovich, the story of Huntley, it was, and on the right you'll see, it was the largest class action settlement ever. Because PG&E, one of those companies that seemed too big to fail, like SNC-11, like Kavanaugh, big company, right? And they were defeated by a small group of concerned people who were dying because of the presence of this in their water. It's not lies, it's in the materials. We brought this up with the city. This is the response we got back. This is actually quoting your city document. Official answer back to me, saying that those compounds are not present. You can read it right there. That's what they say. In the same reports filed with the city, you can see down here, specifically calling out that there's trace elements in there, or trace amounts of chromium, specifically chromium-6. Okay? It's being diminished as if it's not important. Here's the data sheet. It says, and it looks like a really small number, right? You multiply by a small multiplier and you think, hey, that's irrelevant, right, guys? But when you're talking about 2 billion kilograms of concrete being made a year, that little multiplier becomes a lot of material. So we're talking about almost 10,000 kilograms, specifically, guys, specifically of hexavalent chromium. And the engineers who wrote the report basically said it's not there. The materials are toxic to the creek. I'm going to go through this quickly because I don't want to run out of time. I want to give you the definition of LC50. This is listed in the MSDS for Portland cement. But the definition of LC50 is the concentration of a material which leads to the death of 50% of the species in a single exposure. Okay? LC50 of calcium oxide, which is present in Portland cement, is 50 milligrams.
I have 20 seconds left, Mike.
Okay. So 50 milligrams, I'll jump to this. If you take 3 teaspoons of that material and put it in a swimming pool, it will kill half the fish in that swimming pool. It's toxic at that level. 3 teaspoons in a swimming pool. And if you look at a plant
Can you
like
please
this,
wrap up?
there are, at any given time, 100 to 200 tons of Portland cement in a silo.
Okay.
And they blow up.
Any question for the delegate?
One. You had a question about this map. Was it Area D? You asked what Area D was?
Yeah. Yeah, I can answer. Are you going to answer, or are you going to allow?
You were asking, so areas B, C, and D, they're just being rezoned to open space, but to be permitted to retain the use of the office building as a use.
Yeah, it's the area right of D. Yep.
The area right of D isn't being proposed to have a change.
Yeah, so it's the area immediately to the right of D.
So whatever the current zoning for that is would stay the same. There's no the only recommended changes in the zoning are the ones that are identified. So you have to. I mean, I could probably find it online pretty quick as to what RU.
If I may, Mr.
It's zoned RU.
It is currently zoned rural countryside, RU.
Countryside, right. So it really has no industrial permitted uses in that area.
And they're not allowed to drive a dump truck on that property. Are you?
That would have to come up in site plan as to where their access would be. So I don't.
So if MCON bought the property over there, so if they made a property they could connect through to Richardson Side Road.
They'd have to do it through site plan control as to where they would put and then there's a public.
That's an eventuality.
It's
a
public
side topic.
process. There's a public process to that.
Thank you, Mark. David Ross. Mr. Ross, are you here? Oh, okay.
A little dodgy.
Did Adam Brown lost his position?
Yes, we're gonna. Desktop. Okay, Mr. Chair and councillors, good morning. My name is David Ross, and I was just speaking in opposition to this application. A couple of points to speak to. The first being the application of the Ontario's land use compatibility guidelines. So these are the characteristics of a Class 3 industrial facility. The D6 guidelines objective is to prevent or minimize the encroachment of sensitive land use upon industrial land use, and vice versa, as these two types of land uses are normally incompatible. Concrete batching plant ticks all of the boxes for a Class 3 facility. The application's planning rationale requests that this be treated as a Class 2 facility. When I asked about this, the response was, just last week actually, or the week before, some of the variables in relation to the concrete batching plant identified as Class 3 industrial, but most are Class 2. So I respectfully submit that the planning rationale document reached too far in order to relax evaluation of compatibility for the benefit of the applicant. This is unacceptable to us, the neighboring sensitive land uses. This is a Class 3 batching plant taken from an application in Ontario that was identified as such, Class 3, for the construction of a nearby residential subdivision. This is another example in Burlington, Class 3 facility of an Ontario application for, I think, the construction of a mosque. Aggregate delivery trucks and concrete trucks are heavy trucks, even though most of their characteristics are common with a car. They have seats, they have a steering wheel. But this loud, dusty, high-traffic, heavy industrial facility is a truck. It's not a car. Just a few notes from a resident's perspective of the community design plan we heard about a little earlier. It's an overview of our study area. I think we're familiar with it by now. Dotted line is our community design plan study area. Here's a little bit of a closer look. Sorry to rotate your view for you there. Red dot being the subject property. To review the uses in use with our plan here. So we have heavy industrial to the right, that's to the southeast, as you've heard about already. The quarry and the dump is there. Our Richardson Side Road, which is our red line in between the heavy industrial area towards the highway and where it goes into light industrial and commercial uses from there toward the village of Carp. Of course, we have our rural residential areas, which we all enjoy on either side of that. So this brown heavy industrial plant is asked to be located here, encroaching upon our rural residential areas and, of course, going into the commercial and light industrial areas. This would deliver financial losses to me and my neighbors and impede our ability to enjoy our properties. I want to talk a little bit about the slippery slope of precedent. We have asked about future applications leveraging this one. The answer we get is unsatisfactory because the decision-making process uses precedents extensively. Precedent is leveraged throughout the planning rationale and in the planning department's report. Look here at our Richardson red line again and where our heavy industrial is. We transitioned into light, we have some light development there, and of course onward throughout. And we're talking about transitioning back to heavy. This is not a transitional area, this is a reversal. This ramps up the heavy industrial use in this direction. There is no way, using the precedence habits that we have with planning, that the city could say no to further heavy industrial development adjacent to such a heavy industrial use here. All the ambient noise report, the acoustic reports reference the ambient noises. This plant would be a precedent that would be excellent to compare against uses in these two areas, further eroding our community. I want to talk again here just about the project description, which is missing from the applicant's submissions. Project description is a core part of an application. I'm a vice president at an international engineering firm. We have 24,000 people around the world, and I can tell you that the project description is a key part of any professional application. It's missing from this application. In fact, in order to find out how many trucks this plant is going to be associated with, you have to dig deep into the acoustic assessment.
Can you wrap up, Mr. Ross, please?
Okay, so the final point here is just about the use of this property. So this is the quarry down to the south and the site to the north. If we take a common destination here, travel time from these two locations are within 2 minutes, assuming an uninterrupted left onto Carp Road. We asked the applicant how it made sense to truck aggregate all the way to that site and then back, with all of the traffic, the safety, the dust, the noise concerns that come along with it. What else is going on here? The answer is we really don't know. We don't know what this project is really all about, but we don't need to.
Okay,
I respectfully request the committee that the request to approve this heavy industrial facility is incompatible with our community's prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Any question for Mr. Ross? Yeah, we have a question for you, sir. Again, folks, you're taking away time from your colleague by delaying the meeting. So please, go ahead, Councillor.
You cited 2 other blanching plants in Ontario. Is what's being proposed here around in your CARP, is it similar to your knowledge?
Yes, so these batching plants, I specifically took those pictures because they were of small batching plants with a single tower, outdoor gravel storage, just like this one. So aggregate is delivered to here. You can see the cement places to the right there, where they would then take a front end loader, dig into that limestone, crushed limestone, and move it, dump it back into the hopper. All of that movement is to my layman's comparison, very similar.
And are they in? Do they have any rural residential in these areas? Do you know what's around them?
These are actually urban, well, they're more urban areas than others. So this one in Pickering was referenced in they were wanting to, there was some land nearby that they wanted to turn into some townhouse development, community development. And so they reference all of the land uses around it because they don't want to build houses if those residents are going to be in an sensitive land use, and then it would be incompatible with existing industrial uses. So this wasn't an application for the batching plant. These are applications for lots of other things. The other one was a construction of a mosque. So they just want to make sure that you're not going to put a sensitive land use where there's already a heavy industrial use.
So that's the reverse for what we're doing.
That's right. So this case, they're applying for a batching plant. So it would be detrimental to all the comparators and all the decision making, the rationale for the planning report. If you can if you can slide through that this is a class 2, then everything starts to relax in terms of buffers and comparators.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Meehan. Any other question? Thank you, Mr. Ross. Next, Joe Kang. Joe, are you here? Okay. Yeah, it's on. Thank you. No, it went off again. Yeah, just. Okay.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name's Joe Kang. I'm a resident of CARP, and I just want to touch on a few points that I oppose this amendment for the zoning. I want to touch on the traffic. This whole operation does not meet the CARP corridor design, I feel. What it's just going to do on CARP Road is going to cause where the entrance to the site is to make that left turn for these heavy trucks. It will basically cause there'll be an intersection put up there with traffic lights at Cavanmore Road adjacent to the entrance of the site. So you're talking 14 ready-mix trucks in an hour, 12 raw material trucks from 7 to 1900. So that's, if you do the math, that's a minimum of 312 trucks a day. At a busy roadway with speeds of 70 kilometers and 80 kilometers, which is a normal speed, these trucks going in and out of that site trying to make their way to 417, that'll just be a safety, won't be very safe at all. So I'm asking you guys to put the brakes on it and save Huntley Creek. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any question for Joe? Thank you very much, sir. Next, David Kennedy. Did they all ask for that before? Okay. Mr. Kennedy, go ahead, please.
Thank you. My name is David Kennedy. I'm an engineer, and I've been working in the oil and gas industry for a while now, and I work beside geologists. So I didn't know much about rocks when I started in the oil and gas industry, but I learned a lot talking to geologists, and it's amazing what you learn about rocks. So I want to talk a bit about limestone and limestone dust, and why is that relevant? So we're talking about a concrete plant. So what's actually concrete? What is it? It's approximately 10 to 15% Portland cement, aggregate of 60%, primarily limestone, but there's sand and other things, and then 25% water, and they mix that together. And so we have this limestone, and so limestone is the thing you see everywhere. It's this crushed stone, granular A. It's got many names. You can buy a bag of it at Home Depot. You can you go to the garden center and you can pick up as much as you like. Is it toxic? Does anyone think about these things? You have a safety data sheet for limestone. The safety data sheet is written by the people who sell limestone, and they tell you it, and it is a category 1A carcinogen. It is the highest level carcinogenic. There's no higher level than 1A. So it's a confirmed human carcinogen, and they talk about do not put fine particles of the limestone in your waterways, in your ponds. This is right in the data sheet for the product. And specifically, it's carcinogenic with repeated inhalation of the crystalline silica, the quartz. And it says may cause because they're trying to sell the product, but it's silicosis, which is a scarring of the lungs. So as you breathe in this dust, you're going to scar your lungs, and it's irreversible and potentially fatal. Just like smoking over 20 years, 30 years is fatal. They have in their data sheet that this product is fatal. And so this is a picture we saw recently, previous presentation. The whole thing is dusty. The whole thing is white, and these big piles of limestone. So basically, they bring in dump trucks of limestone and dump it down, and then they take a front-end loader and pick it up and put it in their machine, in their system. So they have asked for 2,000 cubic meters of concrete a day to be produced. 2,000 cubic meters times 2650 kilograms per cubic meter, divided by half, so 50%. Do the math. It ends up being 100 dump trucks a day. Not traffic. I'm talking about piles of rock. And they talk about the traffic and all the number of trucks that are going on the road. That's over and above the existing traffic on Carp Road. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the dust. So every time they dump it, you see this plume of dust that they advertise on their website. Every time they pick up a pile of dust, scoop it to put it in their machine, it's more dust. The whole thing is a dust factory. It simply produces dust. And in their environmental report, they list that crystalline silica emissions are negligible because they're only talking about the crystalline silica emissions after they put it into their tower. So there's additional emissions there, and their environmental report talks about that one small part, not about the open pile that produces dust a day. 100 dump trucks a day, that's a truck every 15 minutes if you did it 24 hours a day. And it's going to be concentrated, obviously, during the day, but every 15 minutes, they're going to put a pile of rock down, producing dust. Then they're going to pick it up and produce more dust. This thing produces dust constantly. And no one's talking about this issue. And they say, oh, it's a negligible emission. This is one of many examples of the environmental impacts that this Class 3 high, heavy industrial site will have on the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any question to Mr. Kennedy? No? Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Gillian Demers. Can you speak to the mic, Gillian, please? Bring the mic closer to you, please.
I live next door to where you want to put the concrete plant. We have frogs and turtles and birds in our backyard, and me and my brother love them. And if you put the concrete plant, they're going to die, so I don't want the concrete plant to go in.
Okay. Thank you, Gillian. Thank you. Michelle Demers, I see the connection here.
My name is Michelle Demers. I share a property line with the proposed concrete plant. I just want to say that I'm opposed to the concrete plant.
And your name is Michelle Demers, right?
Yep.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Thank you. Greg Wilson, sorry. Mr. Wilson? Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. So my name is Craig Wilson. I'm a resident of Canada, and I live quite a comfortable distance from the site of the proposed project. I'm here in support of my fellow residents who do live in close proximity to this area, and I emphatically oppose the construction of the proposed plant. First off, this is certainly not a NIMBY issue, not a case of not in my backyard, for the proposed plant housing some of the most dangerous, insidious, carcinogenic, poisonous chemicals should not be in anyone's backyard. I ask the honorable council members to consider whether they would be comfortable having their own children or grandchildren going to school or playing in a park next door to this plant, for this is effectively the fate you would be imposing on the families that live nearby. Now, when industrial companies propose new plans to carry out work with hazardous materials, objecting members of the public are told, "Don't worry, you're being alarmist. Risks are minimal. Procedures and protocols are in place. Your fears are unwarranted. Nothing will go wrong, of course, until it does." Just ask the people of Powell, where in 1984, the Union Carbide pesticide plant experienced a gas leak that caused thousands of fatalities and over 500,000 life-altering injuries. You cannot read the description of long-term effects of this accident without being brought to tears. What about the people of Chernobyl, who had a nuclear reactor in their backyard?
Oh my God.
Beyond the immediate injuries and fatalities, generations of families are still dealing with a high incidence of birth defects and cancers. This was an accident that changed the opinion of the entire world regarding the relative safety of the production of nuclear energy. What would the people of Lac-Mégantic have to say? All of the apologies and wringing of hands that come in the wake of tragedy do nothing for the people whose lives are forever changed. More to the point, I beg you to Google cement plant accident. The results will lead you to many frightening but real-life stories, like the cement plant in Dartmouth that was closed after an explosion launched the roof of a silo hundreds of meters down the street, or the actions of S-Rock Canada in Picton, Ontario, who was fined almost $500,000 for violations involving dust and noise from its cement manufacturing plant. In this case, the city of Picton received complaints regarding emissions described as a gray dust, haze, fog, smoke, or smog coming from the S-Rock factory and coating personal property and area homes. S-Rock admitted to these incidents, pled guilty, and was heavily fined. And that is my concern here. Where there is cement, there is granular dust. And over time, whether due to accident, negligence, or unforeseen circumstances, that dust will escape whatever confinement procedures are put in place. It simply will. It will get into the air and into the groundwater, and it will carry with it deadly toxins. And what then? You may need to wait 20 or 30 or 40 years to find out. But the residents in close proximity, repeatedly exposed to mercury, lime, or lung-destroying crystalline silica, will pay the price for your science experiment. And for the council members who approve this project, your names will be tattooed on the skin of every cancer patient and emblazoned on every death certificate. And you will not be able to say that the outcome could not possibly have been foreseen. Industrial accidents are not unlikely. They are inevitable. It's only a question of when. So why would you not simply plan in a perimeter of safety away from populated areas? Now, while the potentially serious negative health impacts of this proposed plant may not reveal themselves for years to come, what will be immediate is the financial impact to the homeowners living in close proximity. Property values will certainly plummet, as will the number of potential buyers. Who would buy a house next to a cement manufacturing plant given virtually any alternative? For some of the affected homeowners, the loss in net worth may be as much or more than 50%. Now, what do you think Mr. Kavanaugh would do if the city, a competitor, or another business was proposing an action that would reduce his net worth by 50%? People who are already facing financial devastation may not have the resources or be willing to take the risk to fight a multi-year legal battle to the very end.
Can you please wrap up, Mr. Wilson? Your time's up.
A much better alternative would be to simply carry out responsible urban planning, designate land for industrial use a safe distance away from residential housing, and maintain a safe perimeter forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any question for Mr. Wilson? I see none. Thank you, sir. Louisette Tremblay, Ms. Tremblay. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity for us to participate in the process. My name is Louisette Tremblay. I am a resident on Oak Creek Road. We relocated there in 2012, investing more than half our net worth, which now might be much less if this process goes through, into a significant woodland property. We have a forest plan in place. We are planning to plant upward of 5 spring through a participation of the a program with the Rideau Valley Conservation. We moved there and we made a life plan. Children with a wholesome lifestyle, and to educate them on where their food comes from and the importance and fragility of the environment. There is a good reason why the world now is mobilizing to see how we can do better with the environment. This morning, I'm here to find out how the interests of one individual, sorry, this was a draft, but that's okay. I'm well within my 5 minutes. I guess I'm here to find out how, one individual can come along and ask us to change the plan. Change the plan to accommodate the interests and financial gain of one individual corporation at the expense of a whole community. And how is it possible that despite all the relevant points and information that we've heard this morning, this rezoning process is still going on? I hope that we are here today to make the right choice, choose the interests of the many, of the environment, and not that of a self-vested corporation with a track record of blunt disrespect for the environment. It's, I'm not sure that we've heard that part, but I know that the community has prepared a lot of information, and it's a well-known fact that the subject has, choose to pay fine instead of listening to, the process and the rule that needed to be followed. So I am extremely concerned because our treetops are 300 meters from the subject property, and I want to see my tree grow. I want the resident of our community to enjoy the forest and the trail that we're making in that land. So I thank you very much for listening, and I sure hope that you make the right decision and turn down their application.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Tremblay. Thank you. Ms. Tremblay, can you please, Ms. Tremblay, we have a question for you from the Vice Chair.
I do have a question. When you purchased your house last year?
In 2012.
2012. What was your understanding of what the land in question could be used for?
Actually, thank you for asking, because we did look into that, and our understanding is that our block of land was light industrial commercial facing onto Carp Road, and it was residential and farming on the Oak Creek Road and on I guess, Antmar and going down to where there is residential development. There is a lot more residential development happening now, so it's obviously we're not the only one who are going to be impacted by that, but it's of great concern.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Madam Tremblay. Mary Kavanagh. Good morning, Mary.
Morning, and I just want to qualify, Mary Kavanagh, but in no relation. So I am living on, some homestead property, though, that was originally owned by the Kavanaghs of the area, and I want to just, represent my strong opposition to the application. I know Lisette talked about it, and the ministry will, I'm sure, if this is approved, make some recommendations about how the land or how the Kavanaugh construction should be operating to preserve the natural environment. And I just Googled it. Look at it. Google Kavanaugh fines, and you can see that there's been a couple of situations in the last couple of years where Mr. Kavanaugh has shown disrespect to the wetlands. So Jock River is an example, and in Arnprior. And we have wells. We don't have city water on our road. So if there's any, and there's a lot of natural springs. So if there's any contamination, we're going to be drinking it. So I think that all of us have come together today because we believe it's the worst thing that could happen to our community. Carp's a great community, and we've got, it's nice to see the development coming out, and I think we need to protect that. We need to support having the residential community come toward us, and to honor and respect the rural community that exists, the horse farms that are there. We've got, right behind me, I've got, I can't even put a shed on my backyard, by the way, because of the wetlands that are protected. And, and I've honored that. I won't do that. So, my ask to you is that you do the same, that you honor, the agreement that was put in place, and respect the wildlife, respect our community, respect our children, and our people. So thank you for your time. And again, it's Mary Murphy Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Mary. Sue Pryor. Okay. No. Okay. No, you're not. Sorry.
One of the last. I'm going to raise 2 points that I did not have in my notes. One of the factors that people who don't know the area well may not realize is that this plant is above the elevation of the other heavy industrial plants. They are in a sunken area that's in basically the old quarries. And therefore, any impact from dust, sound, light will travel further. Plus, Kavanaugh is asking for a height alteration. Plus, there are school buses across the road sitting there. Many, many school buses that are going to be coated with dust. And our kids are going to be getting in those buses every goddamn day, and they are going to be subjected to that dust. Or the bus company is going to get there at 4 in the morning on a nice cold day and wash it down, and then we're going to add more water dirtied into the system. Now I'll go to my notes. My name is Sue Pryor. I live at the very far end of Oak Creek Road on a 200-year-old organic farm, and I want to talk about the costs on the carp. One of the weaknesses of the reports that I have seen is the failure to count the cost in terms of the impact on the general area. This is an area where I and other people have been investing. The city has many wide open environmental areas that they're trying to save. So, after our floods and tornadoes recently, we must take into that into account. About 8 years ago, Doug Nuttall of the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority and the Friends of the Carp River discussed a wish list for the river's restoration. Oakley Wetlands was one of 2 major sites on that list. It is home to blanding turtles. These are a species at risk. I have seen them. The head of the city environment, Nick Stowe, has seen them on my property. They have been seen on the Carp River behind my property. They've been seen on 840 Huntmar, which is directly in line with where the Huntley Creek flows out. So we have that. $500,000 the city invested along with the feds to protect my land and to restore that wetland. That project restored some of the damage created in 1911, 100 and something years ago. That wetlands was destroyed. But the wetland is only minutes downstream from Huntley Creek and therefore the proposed facility. Over the last few years, many of you have watched the Terry Fox Restoration Project develop along the Carp River. That's the one that you can see from the Senators down to Farm Boy. That project cost the city, I'm told, $22 million. That land is upstream from where the Huntley Creek flows into the Carp River, but it is downstream and downwind from the facility. The designers talk about filters, but they haven't found a way to filter dust from those trucks, as others have mentioned. It will blow, and then the rest of it will wash into the holding ponds. Did you know that the Mississippi Valley has started fundraising for their new Carp River Living Classroom, which will be on that land? Let's hope that the river, the otters that I have seen there, and the fish remain as a living classroom. If there is another tornado or a torrential rainstorm immediately after those 220 trucks and the silos have been washed down for the day, where in the name of heaven is that water going to go? It's going to go into Huntley Creek. We have spent $23 million recently trying to correct the errors of 1911. How long will we be correcting the ones that are about to follow if you go through with this? Kavanaugh Construction goes to court and it pays the fines, but nobody has bothered to tell us how much those court costs cost the public. How much did it cost the Environment Ministry of Ontario to sue Kavanaugh for $275,000? I have asked and nobody will tell me. Those fines are just the cost of doing business to Kavanaugh. My family was in business for many years designing air traffic control software.
Can you please wrap up, Mr. Pryor?
I have 30 seconds. I posted large bonds for many years guaranteeing that our design work. Has Kavanaugh posted a $25 to $100 million bond to guarantee safety for the redfins, the blanding turtles, the birds that have come back to nest, the snappers that cross Huntmire and Oak Creek all summer? And what about the health of our kids? That health is priceless.
Thank you, Madam Pryor. Thank you.
Are there any questions, sir? Are there any questions?
Let me ask that question. There's none. Thank you. Bonnie Kiefer. What's that? No. We told her no.
Hello, counselors. My name's Bonnie Kiefer, and this is
her daughter, Brooke.
Hi, Brooke.
And I oppose.
I'm Sue's daughter. I live two houses down from her. I was just congratulating my mom last week, Saturday or Sunday on March 1st, saying, hey, congratulations on our anniversary of you and Dad purchasing the property back in 1997, of 32 years. And I was thinking that it's pretty crappy that now we're going and talking about this issue that's coming up for our environment. So I just thought that was kind of a, yes, congratulations on the anniversary of it, but also it really sucks. So one thing I wanted to talk about was the environment. Most important to myself and my family is a sensitive environment habitat that can easily be threatened by the construction, the implementation, and the running of the concrete plant. The water, soils, air, light pollution, and sound pollution that will probably affect this. My kids love playing outside. When we go down to my mom's ponds in the back, and they play in the creek, and they don't want to be harmed while they're down in there. So I oppose this too, and so do my other two kids and my husband. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Renita Grewal.
Just want to say, it'd be super strange if one of your kids didn't oppose it. Like that'd be a really awkward argument at kitchen table.
You're right. Good morning, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
My name is Renita Graywall, and I'm a resident of Newell Place. Before 1985, a DUI was a fine, $50 to $300. People paid these fines and continued to offend. After many deaths today, DUIs fall under the criminal code because lives matter. How many deaths and cases of lethal cancer would it take for environmental infraction laws to become criminal? Will it take 5, 10, or 20 deaths? Kavanaugh has already been fined $275,000 in 2017 alone, and all they do is pay their fines and walk away. If they break them again, it's our health at risk. People in your place before 1985 probably wish they had made DUI criminal long ago, knowing the deaths they caused, as would have those who allowed smoking in airplanes and in hospitals, saying now we know better. Don't make the wrong decision and look back because you do know better. People always say, when you know better, you do better. Please make the right decision, as we now all know better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Greenwald. Lynn O'Keefe. After Ms. O'Keefe, we have Kevin Tippett, if you want to get in line. Ms. O'Keefe.
Good morning.
Get closer to the mic.
Okay. All right. My name is Lynn O'Keefe Graby. I've recently moved back to Canada after having lived in the United States for over 20 years. During my time over there, I watched as the air and water quality deteriorated to crisis levels in some communities. I saw the various levels of government do nothing to ensure that citizens would be protected. They provided empty promises to our health, that our health was a priority, yet all the while allowing corporations to dump toxins in our water and on the land. I was keenly aware of these problems because of my son Ryan, who was born with a compromised liver. So clean water and air has always been critical for him. It became so bad in Phoenix, Arizona, where we lived, that I convinced my husband to move to Canada. I assured him that we could be certain that the air and water would be clean. Canadians care about these things, I told him. We can count on our government to do the right thing. Ryan will be safe there. So imagine my disappointment when I received a flyer in the mail stating that the Carp Road Corridor Community Design Plan was going to be changed. This one change threatens the health of my son and the welfare of my family. If you approve this rezoning, we will be forced to move. Concrete plants are not clean or green. They create toxic dust that causes serious health issues, even to healthy people. Eventually, those toxic chemicals will make their way into the water table, and this community will be ruined. I honestly cannot understand why this application is even under consideration.
Into our property. We did so knowing that the vacant land around our property was zoned as light industrial. We never anticipated that the natural landscape and the general enjoyment of our backyard would include a 7-story concrete batch plant along with the noise of dozens of trucks and reversing truck alarms. I would suspect that the lost value of our home to be at least 15 to 20%. This is based on our neighbor who recently lost the sale of his home as a result of the proposed rezoning application. My wife and I are not wealthy individuals that can absorb the lost value of our home. The proponent, on the other hand, is not negatively impacted nearly to the same degree should this request be denied. In other words, the proponent has materially nothing to lose with this application, but the residents of the area have a devastatingly sizable portion of our life savings gone. When I look at the future of that land, should this application be accepted, I am terrified that it will be much easier for the additional heavy industrial use to be introduced. Should additional heavy usage be introduced to that land, it will only further reduce our home values. I firmly believe that it isn't right from a city planning perspective to have heavy industrial uses encroach so closely on residential neighborhoods. I can understand if residential is encroaching on industrial, as that's the purchaser's choice, but to have such a heavy industrial use doesn't make planning sense when there's such ample land in rural Ottawa. I'm by no means a noise expert, but noise doesn't need to be loud to ruin our enjoyment. When a cell phone goes off in a meeting or a theater, it isn't loud, but it is distracting, and it ruins the enjoyment. When someone's clicking a pen over and over, it isn't loud, but again, it's distracting. When you hear truck reverse alarms over and over, or the sound of cement trucks idling day after day after day, it may not be loud, but it ruins the enjoyment of our neighborhood and our homes. I've reviewed, regarding the provincial industrial class, I've reviewed several engineering reports, as many as I could get my hands on, and I've yet to find a single classification of Class 2 for a concrete batch plant. I've seen batch plants they've listed either as classification 3, as we saw earlier, or they're a hybrid of 2/3. Class 3 land uses recommend a distance of 300 meters from sensitive land uses. The proponent would be in violation of this recommendation if they were classified as a Class 3. Page 21 of the report from the Director of Planning Services confirms that there are some elements of Class 3 industrial use present in the expected use of the land. It goes on to say that there's also Class 2 elements as well. What's disappointing is that despite the presence of Class 3 elements, the Director gives the benefit of the doubt to the proponent and concludes on a Class 2, not a Class 2/3 hybrid, simply a Class 2. Dust is a known concern to batch plants. Yes, there are monitoring by the appropriate regulators. However, the reality is there will be additional dust in our neighborhood, on our houses, our kids' toys, our play structures, and so on. I don't know what makes up chemicals in the dust or what risks really exist within certain rocks, but I do know that it is not healthy to breathe in dust. There was a study done in Italy in 2012 that found, or that confirmed, additional risks to children and seniors that live within the area of a concrete batch plant, essentially additional hospitalization. I would hope that the city wouldn't ignore the health risks of our residents by forcing a batch plant within 300 meters of where our kids are playing. The city wouldn't put a batch plant within 300 meters of a children's park for this exact reason. We don't have a park for our children in our area, therefore our street and our backyard is our kids' park. The 5 young families on Newell Place have invested a great deal of resources to make Newell Place our home. To date, our street has been quiet and safe, and now I worry about our peaceful environment will be ruined
30 seconds left, Kevin.
by the short term and long term, as potentially other industrial uses are added. The heavy industrial use neighbor certainly doesn't add value to our property, and I would certainly argue that it devalues. Finally, the health of our children and our seniors on our street is most concerning. I hope that you consider our family's financial and health concerns.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for your presentation. We have Mr. Ron O'Keefe. Ron O'Keefe. We missed him out earlier. They said so. We still have 3 left. Good morning, Mr. O'Keefe.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and council members. My name is actually Ron Graby. My wife spoke previously. I'm the husband that she convinced to move to Canada.
Well, the O'Keefe is a local name, so we make you O'Keefe's husband then.
That's great.
So the name came up to us, sorry.
Yeah, I understand O'Keefe has a history in Canada, primarily in the beer industry. Anyway, as I mentioned, I'm the husband that my wife convinced to move to Canada as we searched for a place that offered pristine air quality and uncontaminated water, primarily for the benefit of our son, who has those health issues. We thought we found that place in the Carp Road area. We're residents of Canterbury Estates, which is just west of Carp Road off and north of Richardson Side Road. Referencing the City of Ottawa's Carp Road Corridor Community Design Plan, dated June 2004, it lays out the characteristics of both light and heavy industrial uses. As the term implies, light industrial use permits commercial enterprises with a limited environmental or aesthetic impact. In contrast, the plan states, and I'm quoting here, heavy industrial uses by their nature include those that generate noise, fumes, odors, vibrations, and are hazardous and obnoxious. A heavy industrial concrete plant certainly checks off all of those criteria. Concrete plants pose a threat to both air and water quality. Cement dust is unavoidable. Indeed, cement is an ingredient of the operation. Cement dust can contain numerous contaminants, including lead and, as mentioned, hexavalent chromium and others. The dust will inevitably be carried by the wind into neighborhoods such as ours. Perhaps a bigger concern is water quality. The proposed location lies within a zone that is designated as a high recharge area by the City of Ottawa's Carp Road Corridor Community Design Plan. High recharge area is not a term that I'm familiar with, but the plan does define it. It defines it as an area that represents a location where surface water infiltrates into the ground. Communities along the Carp River corridor all depend on well water. What happens to our communities a couple of years downstream when our wells have been contaminated? My family and I strongly oppose any rezoning of the area to accommodate the construction of a heavy concrete production plant. Such an action of rezoning would represent a violation of the protections intended by the original Carp Road Corridor Community Design Plan. It would betray the representations made to homeowners such as ourselves that were the basis of our individual decisions to locate our families to the area in which we currently live. In the end, you've had the chance to hear the objections of residents of the area. Whose vote, I would ask you, is more important? The residents of the community that will be impacted, or the vote of a corporation whose environmental record shows that an occasional fine for an environmental transgression is just part of their normal business plan? I urge you to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Sandy Powell.
Good morning. My name is Sandy Powell. I'd like to thank the committee for taking the time to allow the public to air their opinions on this topic. I grew up in a desert area where water was considered to be more precious than gold. That was Scottsdale, Arizona, where I had a ranch. I brought the stewardess a knowledge of keeping pristine water to the forefront to my property, which encompassed an area of acreage along the second line for over 20-some years, where I had 3 wells, and they were all pristine and of good quality. My concern is with the water and with the environment in this case. I like to refer to a couple of cliches. One is that we have to learn from the mistake of others. We will not live long enough to make them all ourselves. I would also like to recognize the fact that there is a lot of truth to the saying that act locally and consider that to the benefits of globally. To that, I would like to acknowledge that there is a publication called theguardian.com, which everybody here should access. It is also sponsored by the Rockefeller Foundation. Last week, they considered that week to be Concrete Week. From that documentation available online, I'd like to read to you the following. Cement, the key component of concrete and one of the most widely used man-made materials, is now the cornerstone of global construction. It has shaped the modern environment, but its production has a massive footprint that neither the industry nor governments have been willing to address. Because of the heat needed to decompose rock and natural chemical processes involved in making cement, imagine this, every ton made releases 1 ton of CO2, the main greenhouse warming gas. That makes concrete the most destructive material on Earth. If it were a country, the cement industry would be the 3rd largest in the world. Its emissions only behind that of China and the United States. So far, its carbon footprint, it is so large that unless it is transformed and made into adopt cleaner practices, the industry could, on its own, jeopardize the whole 2015 Paris Agreement, which aims to hold worldwide temperatures to a 2°C increase. To bring that into line, the United Nations says its annual emissions need to fall above 16% in the next 10 years, and by far more in the future. The industry leaders, they should be embarrassed. They are aware that they are in danger of being financially penalized, but they will also be tarred as climate laggards. Annual cement production has quadrupled from nearly 1 billion to over 4 billion tons in 30 years. In the next decade, it is expected to increase a further 500 million tons a year. Unless there is a dramatic change, cement emissions are expected to continue to rise beyond 2050. I would like to also note that this article was written by John Vidal, and I think it's a clear representation of what we have to take a look at. We are doing our best here in Ottawa. There's no doubt about it. There is a lot of concerned people here, and they'll have justified reasons to be concerned. We have to take a look at what has been happening globally to recognize that this is our moment to stand up and say, not here. The cement industry does have options available to them. They should be encouraged to pursue them. We don't have to continue with cement. It's done its best for us in the past, but it's going to be a death knell to us in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Andy Toro. After Andy, we have Barb Ball. If anyone would like to speak, hasn't registered or haven't spoke yet, please register with the clerk. Just press the button, okay? Just press it. Oh, that's it. But you got to speak to it, Andy. Okay. Push it away.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Andy Terods. My wife and I have owned Acorn Creek Garden Farm on Carp Road since 1978. We're downstream from the plant. And my presentation will deal more with the water pollution of the farmland in the area. We are the first farm that is below the entryway of the creek onto the Carp River, and so we're downstream from this. The location will be getting a lot of runoff. Whenever there's a heavy rain, and we have heavy rains every once in a while, the runoff will run from there into the creek, down the faster flowing creek to the Carp River. And that's the first time it gets to flood its banks. As you know, the Carp River tends to flood its banks regularly, and that flooding starts as the creek enters the Carp River. So the dirty water coming from the cement plant, and you notice in the pictures how gray those sites are. Those sites are gray because they're covered in dust. Well, the first thing to get washed into the creek is going to be the dust. So to solve that problem, you have to put a restriction on all runoff from that site being fully treated so that the particulate and all of the dissolved minerals that are released by the very fine particles are removed from the water before it enters the creek. Are you going to do that? So we're going to have runoff. So that runoff will travel down to the Carp River, and then when it gets to the Carp River, it's going to come down to our farm, the first farm below the creek, and it's going to flood the back of our farm. Right now, if it gets flooded, okay, it brings in a bit of silt, a lot of water, and that's not a bad thing, except that the land is not available at all times. With this change, it will bring in polluted water. And that polluted water will bring minerals that I don't want, toxins that are going to pollute my land. They're also going to flood my irrigation pond, which is in that floodplain, and that water then will have the polluted products in it. That water I use for irrigating crops, vegetable crops, that are sold in the Ottawa area. So I do not sell my vegetables anywhere but in the Ottawa area. I sell to restaurants, I sell to the Carp Farmers Market, I sell at the Ottawa Farmers Market, and I sell at the farm gate. All of those are local. They're your residents, people that you're responsible for, and this will then pollute the water that goes to them. Very unacceptable for me. Now, even if you try to get Kavanaugh to treat all its water, with the reputation, the great reputation they have for obeying the rules, can you trust them? Can you as a committee trust them to do what you impose on them, even if you could? So this is an aerial map of the area. The Kavanaugh site is located in the lower left corner of the picture, and the blue line follows the creek down to the Carp River. I haven't shown all of the Carp River flooding, but just the area that affects me. So the creek runs into the Carp River in the light blue area at the top, and instead of reaching the Carp River, it will flow sideways on the surface and onto my land, which is the long parcel of dirt that first comes in contact with the Carp River after it touches the Huntley Road. That same flooding takes place 2 farms down at Sue Pryor's location, and hundreds of other acres downriver. So all that land will be absorbing polluted water. Acorn Creek produces only food for the Ottawa area. There's an alternate site we can look at, and it's not far away. It was alluded to earlier as to where Kavanaugh takes its aggregate from.
Can you please wrap up, Andrew? You have 30 seconds.
Okay. It's just around the corner west of Stittsville. There's no residential nearby, none. There's no farmland nearby. It's located here where you saw on an earlier map in the lower left corner. Their other site is right near us. That combination doesn't have to be there. They can do no hauling and deposit all of their stuff into their cement plant from their own site. They don't have to go on the road with those trucks. The dust is far away from anybody else, and we don't get polluted water.
Thank you, Auntie.
Thank you very much. I'm strongly opposed to this.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Meehan? Just put 2 minutes.
Is the alternate site that you're proposing, is it on a source of water?
I'm not sure how close it is to water, but they do have a very large quarry there that is already in full swing. Like, they've got acres and acres. Below that site and to the south and to the east of it, which is to the right, they also have further quarries. So there's not as if it's just one quarry. So if they have to have a water issue, they would have a water issue with those quarries.
I think my understanding is that they have a permit, though, to take water from the Carp River, right? Do they? No? Or that's still up in the air? Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks for the clarification. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our last speaker, not last speaker, but Barb Ball, you're next.
Hello. Can you hear?
Good morning.
Is it on?
It is on.
Okay.
Speak close to
Closer.
it, Barb.
Barb Sharda Ball. I am the Vice President of the Fallowfield Community Association. And our association, our community has 2 quarries in the area. So as an association, we're always watching decisions that are made related to quarries in other communities. And we just wanted to go on record as an association our concerns about the changes, the amendments to the zoning. The encroachment onto the residential areas, the dust issues, that's stuff we faced in our community as well. And the constant kind of the decisions between how far the quarry can encroach and how far the community, to change the life of the community. At what point is the point where if the quarry encroaches too far, does it affect community life?
What kind of quarries do you have?
We have 2 quarries, the Lafarge and Tomlinson.
And what kind of residential impact are you seeing?
Well, we had a few years ago, obviously the truck issue, because there's all the residences being built on Hope Side Road, that it was a big concern in the community about the truck traffic coming from the quarries and then going down Moody Drive, across Fallowfield Road, and then up Old Richmond Road. And that was actually resolved in our community. They built another road directly from the quarries onto Old Richmond Road so that they could bypass our community, because that was an issue. And along with the truck traffic is the dust issue and a lot of other concerns, which in comparison to the cement plant is fairly minor, but it did in fact impact our community.
Thank you.
Just to be, the concern would mainly because with Lafarge, there's a potential to come closer. So you'd look at this as saying that could be something that.
Well, we always look at any other precedents, because obviously decisions made with other quarries would affect our community because precedents have been set. So the precedent would be, someone had mentioned earlier, that slippery slope.
And the Fallowfield Community Association, just to be clear, works very closely with the two quarry operators.
Yes, we have a fairly good relationship with our quarries, yes. But it is always that struggle between industry and residential.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Barb. Our next speaker is Roger Richardson. Mr. Richardson, just registered.
Hello.
Good morning.
Thank you. I have nothing prepared. I wanted to ask a question, as I believe it was Glenn who asked how long one of our neighbors had owned their property. I wondered if you could tell us how long the applicant has owned the land that they are planning to develop.
I don't know, to be honest with you.
Could I ask of?
No, you can ask them offline if you like, but not.
Oh, okay. Okay. I would say 3 years.
Okay.
Anybody in this room?
No, Mr. Richardson, just address the committee. No.
Anybody in this room who's owned their land longer than that?
Well, we don't do questions between delegations and public.
No, but I'd like to point out that this property has been purchased much more recently than a lot of the speakers that you have listened to here today. And I'm one of them. The name Richardson, I grew up on this property. I grew up on Richardson Side Road. I've had to swallow my fair share of development, and I understand it. I benefited from it, but I think we've heard an awful lot opposing this, and I too oppose it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Richardson. The last speaker we have is Chris Collin from Kavanaugh Construction.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr.
My name is Chris Collins. I'm the manager of land development with Kavanaugh Construction. Thank you for your time to allow us to speak today. I'm not going to speak to any of the issues that have been raised today because I don't think there is anything that we can say that's going to appease them at this time. But what I will talk about is what we've done to date. Kavanaugh Construction started out with this project. We owned the land to speak to the previous question, for several years. And it was always our intent to develop the property as an industrial use. We always knew that there would be concerns with the property no matter what was going to be developed. And therefore, our intent was to not go into this blindly. We set forth with an application. The application has been with the city for some time now. And we knew that in doing that application, we were going to have to meet some criteria. We were going to have to look at all the issues that were going to come forward. And one of the first things that we knew we had to do was speak with the locals. And so we've done that. And in fact, we've done that on 2 occasions. We met in November of 2018, along with the city staff and the councillor himself. And we listened to the concerns, and we took those away. And we tried to implement as much as we could that was reasonable and appropriate into the application and continue to work with the city in that way. We also met with the locals separately by ourselves, Kavanaugh only at the table, with most of the people that are here tonight or this morning, and we listened to their concerns. And we really haven't heard any new concerns that haven't come out of any of those meetings that we had. And in doing so, we feel that the application that we've now got in place has tried to deal with all of those concerns. We know that water's an issue. We do now have in place a permit to take water, which was vetted by not only the city, but it was vetted by the MECP, or the local provincial regulations. And they looked at that, and from their review, which is the highest level, they've determined that we've met the criteria. We've heard the concerns related to environment. We met with the local conservation authority. We've done our site EISs, and we've applied what we feel is the necessary and appropriate measures to our plan to deal with that. There are, that the Huntley Creek went through a recent evaluation. They've applied meander belts and additional boundaries, and we've respected those. In fact, this application is completely outside of those boundaries, and that puts the maximum distance from the creek, and therefore, preserving it to the best we can. And of course, the big concern is the dust and the noise and so on. And the technology that we're implementing is new technology to the best of our ability. This plan is not a refurbished plan. It's not something that came from the example. I don't know how long those plants were in place. The plants are new. This plan is new. It's new technology. We're applying, the best noise and dust reduction. In terms of stockpiles, we're confining the stockpiles. We have spraying systems that knock down the dust. The hard surfaces are not going to be gravel. They're going to be concrete and asphalt. And so we're looking at all the different components of the concerns and in fact, and all the minimum requirements, and we're not doing the minimum. We feel we're doing as much as we can to help. And in fact, we've gone further and said, because of the separation distance between us and the existing Newell Place residents, that we'll implement further measures related to screenings, plantings, and we've asked them to, be part of that and be involved in what it is we're proposing. And so I think ultimately, Kavanaugh Construction is being proactive, and it is not negligent in this application in terms of what is required, and we continue to want to work forward, and in fact, the site plan application will actually deal with a lot of these comments and concerns that come up. We have
30 seconds left, sir.
After we move forward with this specific site plan zoning, we have to go into the site plan application process, and most of these concerns can be dealt through that process. So today we're here to talk about, is it appropriate? We feel it is. It meets the intent of in our opinion, the intent of the Carp Road corridor zoning, and therefore we recommend that it get approved.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Collin. And we have a couple of questions. Don't go. We have Councillor Meehan first.
Thank you for telling us that you're trying to mitigate some of the problems, that you recognize the concerns of the residents. I'm just wondering why Kavanaugh decided on this location. If you were planning this kind of plant and you knew that it was light industrial, why did you choose this location, knowing you're going to have to go through this process?
Well, I think, the reason that we've chose this is because of the proximity of the plant to, for a number of reasons, proximity to the 417 and the access that it provides, and the amount of work that we have related to concrete is west of where Carp Road intersects with 417. Currently, right now, we ship, several, hundreds of loads of concrete on busy days from Carlton Place and beyond, and that in itself became an economic decision on our part, because if most of our trucking is going from Carlton Place past Carp Road to the inner areas of the city, it made more sense that we reduce that and cut that travel time and cut the emissions and cut fuel, and all of those things in half by relocating and better serving our community that way.
And I understand that you've got new technology to reduce dust and things like that. What about the noise in the trucks? I mean, you're quite aware of the traffic impact on Carp Road right now. What can you do to mitigate that?
Well, in terms of, I'll speak to traffic. The traffic impact statement and report is being completed right now. It should be done by the end of the month.
But you know what the traffic impact is going to be. We don't need a study.
So what we have said and we continue to say is whatever comes out of that, we are prepared to implement. So,
such as?
If the report says that it needs to be signalized, then we will be doing that.
Traffic, yeah. How new is this technology you're going to be utilizing at this proposed plant?
I'm not personally the expert in the technology related to the concrete plant. We do have people here that could answer that. My expertise obviously is in the land side of things and the development of it. From what I understand, we're looking at the newest technology that is available, and whatever that is, it meets the MOE standards. It meets, and I guess it goes above and beyond, or it's better than what the current plants are operating at.
So you think it mitigates all the residents' concerns then, that they should?
I don't think I would say that anything that we do would ever meet their concerns. What we're trying to do is mitigate to the best of our ability, meeting the standard that the Ministry of the Environment is put out there. So we're doing that, and we're adding what we can through negotiations, through measures that we think will help in that, whether it's trees, shrubs. I don't know. We can look at a lot of different options, and that basically will come out of the site plan application process, how we ultimately do that.
One of the presenters here today suggested an alternate site that might serve your purposes. It doesn't seem to be, it won't be that much further from the 417. Is that an option at all?
We looked at that option. Clearly, it leads to being at that location, but again, the location of this particular site is a better fit ultimately for access and the amount of travel distances and so on to serve the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meehan. Councillor Gower. Yeah, you're on. No, you were on. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you have submitted for an environmental compliance approval with the province, correct?
That's correct.
And what's the current status and timelines for that?
There's several applications that had to be submitted. One was for a permit to take water. That application has been approved and is now with the city. Another application currently under review is for the noise and dust component. And the Ministry of Environment, as we understand it, should be responding to that later this month, as we understand it. And a final application would be related to stormwater component. And that application has not gone in yet. It's part of the process as we move along a little bit further and we get more detailed design completed and so on.
Okay. Next question is, one of the justifications in the report is that this is in a rural employment area. How many jobs would this actually create on this site?
My understanding, and don't quote me on this number, but I understand it'll create about 70 employees overall within the plant, and then it also employs the drivers and so on that are related to the operations that way.
Okay. And last question, I guess two parts. Can you very briefly describe what concrete batching actually entails? Because I don't know. And we've seen a lot of photos presented by the delegations of what they say are similar sites in Ontario and in other places. How accurate or how close will this facility be to what we've seen from some of the delegations?
Well, I don't think I could do it justice. If you would permit, I can invite our concrete supervisor to give you that explanation.
Can you give us the, do we have time for that? The 1 minute or 2 minute, I mean, it's a long morning, but I think it'd be helpful to understand.
Do we have somebody here? Do you have somebody?
If Kevin would come down.
We have a question for him. The committee asked him, and he's the expert on this field.
Just to speak in general terms, there's stockpiles of sand and stone on the site itself. Through the use of a front-end loader, it's loaded into a loading hopper, which is put into the plant. And with the addition of water and admixture chemicals, it has gone through another loading belt into the truck itself, and then all mixed within the truck.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of some of the images we saw earlier, is this close to that? Is it different? You've mentioned it's a newer state-of-the-art facility, but how does it compare to some of the photos we've seen previously today?
It was tough to determine from the image provided, but it would be similar application for sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Stay there, Kevin. Go ahead, ma'am.
The water that you use to mix and put it in, is there residual water from that process?
No, it's all collected within the batch itself. So it's,
does the plant release any water at all?
no, it's collected from the wells and kept in storage tanks within the plant itself, and then it's directed through pumps directly through the loading hopper into the truck and mixed within the concrete. So there's no residual water coming from outside the process.
Okay, and
there's some washed down material after the truck is loaded, but it's being collected into some storage facility basins within the site itself.
And no emissions, just dust that could possibly be released?
Yeah, so the plant is equipped with the latest technology of dust collectors on the silos itself, which stores the cement. And we've also gone above and beyond the requirements of having a loading bay dust collector. So essentially it's a giant vacuum within the closed loading area, which sucks up any residual cement during the loading process and cycled back into the silos.
We haven't done studies on air and water and dust emissions, have we, Sarah?
Through the chair, these are reports that are sent to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks for review, and that's part of the environmental compliance approval that we're awaiting right now.
Which means
If I can explain it, my understanding of it, it will be no work or anything being done on the site till they receive the approval from the Ministry of Environment.
So
water and dust, because that's the Ministry of Environment.
does it make sense for us to consider this application if if the Ministry of the Environment reports come back and say it doesn't meet the standards?
That means it'll go back to nothing. They won't be able to do anything because we're not changing the zoning on the property. The recommendation is to amend the zoning bylaw. So if they don't receive the approval from the Ministry of Environment, this file is dead. Am I correct?
The recommending zoning has a holding provision on it.
That's right.
Which requires that approval from the ministry be obtained. So there is a separate application that has to be submitted demonstrating that they have that ECA approval from the ministry.
I wish we had it so we could. It would help us make a decision. Yeah. But thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Collin and Kevin. Now, question to staff. We start with Councillor Moffett.
Thanks. Just a question about the community design plan. There's been some talk about not adhering to the official plan. But if that was the case, then this would be an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment. But it's just a zoning bylaw amendment. So can you just explain that about how this fits in with the official plan, how the community design plan fits into the official plan?
Yes, through the chair. So the designation in the official plan is rural employment area. And in that designation, it does state that uses permitted in this area are new heavy and light industrial uses, such as steel and concrete fabrication. We do then also have our community design plan, which are guidelines that we look at, do not officially form part of the official plan. However, there is a section in there that says we must look at the CDP. The CDP does does identify this portion as light industrial. There is also section 2.1 of the CDP, which talks about the gradual intensification of uses from the north, as I was mentioning in my presentation at Carp Airport, towards the 417, transitioning through highway commercial, light industrial, and heavy industrial. And then looking at the zoning, when you look at similar permitted uses on the property, there are a number that are similar in intensity to the use that's being proposed. So there are uses that include heavy industrial vehicle sales, rental and servicing, truck transport terminals, warehouses, and waste processing and transfer facilities. So looking at the permitted uses, this does act as a transition because we are adding the one use and transitioning from the heavy on the south side of Richardson Side Road, having that waste transfer facility along the north side, intensifying the center of this lot, and then leading into the industrial subdivisions to the north.
So in some cases, CDPs become a part of the official plan as a secondary plan. Do we know why the Carp Road Corridor CDP never became a secondary plan?
Not sure, Mr. Chair, to be honest.
Not chair, he's the chair. He used to be the chair.
Not sure, to be honest. That's a consideration by our policy department in conjunction with the ward councillor as to what level those plans would rise to. And in this case, it stayed as a community design plan. There are many other examples throughout the rural area where a CDP is its own plan and not enshrined in the official plan, where in other examples they did become part of the secondary plan. And there's a few examples in Councillor Moffat's ward.
So, in the end, this application is consistent with the official plan as it's written today?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. I realize the environmental compliance approval is a provincial responsibility, and perhaps a question for our legal staff here today. In terms of where the process is now, are you aware if there's still an opportunity for public consultation in that ECA process?
I don't know if any of the residents have made comments with respect to this application. It's my understanding from the proponent that they have not yet submitted their stormwater component, which would normally occur in and around the time of site plan, at which time the municipality will also have its own consultation process through that planning application.
Thank you. I wanted to thank the delegations for the comments today. And I know you've probably all spent time off of work or off of other commitments. And I'm very sympathetic to the concerns about environment, but many of those, in fact, perhaps everything that we heard is really the provincial approval process. And I hope as much as you've shared those concerns with us today, that you're also sharing them with the appropriate provincial body. Usually there is a public opportunity to comment as part of that process, and they do listen and take those into account. Wanted to continue. In the report, it said the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority generally did not object to this proposal. Can you provide some more detail? What does generally not object mean?
Yes, through the chair. The Conservation Authority has been reviewing both the zoning bylaw amendment and the site plan application concurrently. There are still some outstanding questions and comments from the Conservation Authority that they would like to have addressed, but they have said they would have liked both applications to continue concurrently, but if we were to move ahead with the zoning at this point, they are generally satisfied enough to for the zoning, whereas they'd still like to have their comments addressed through the site plan application.
Okay. And then I think my last question is, this seems to be a borderline class 2 or class 3, and there are variables. There's also a reference to this would be similar intrusion to a nearby Tomlinson waste transfer. So in that context, can you provide some clarity as to what the variables were and how your decision was made to classify this as class 2 versus class 3?
Yes, through the chair, there are a number of variables that are considered in a D6 compatibility between industrial facilities document prepared by the ministry. If you'd like me to list all of them, I could. However, there is a lengthy variable list. And I would note this, I did speak to staff at the MECP regarding these guidelines, and these are guidelines to help local planning authorities to make a decision on what that classification is in order to review those setback and influence areas that are noted in this bylaw, in this guideline. The Class 2 and Class 3 typing of a use doesn't actually officially draw back to our definitions and setback requirements. But if you'd like me to go through the...
I think that's sufficient. There's a Class 1, a Class 2, a Class 3. How much higher does it go?
It's just 3 classes, but
Okay.
it's about a page and a half of variables.
Okay. Is this more of a 2 or a 2.5 or a 3? Maybe that'd be a better way to ask it.
When I was doing my review, and I was looking at this in terms of what was explained to me that this batching plant was considered, I identified 9 variables in the Class 2. And 5 in the Class 3.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Those are good questions. First of all, I'd like to thank my resident, my neighbors who made the trip today here to present to our committee. As you heard from the Vice Chair's question, today we are dealing with the zoning bylaw amendment. And clearly, most of the question we heard is concern, and they're valid concern. But my question to our legal staff, knowing we have a provision in this bylaw as holding provision for the approval of the Ministry of Environment, does that mean staff will be monitoring this and making sure none of the work will take place on a site before they receive all their approval from the Ministry of Environment?
Legally, even without the holding provision, that work cannot take place without those provincial approvals. But it's my understanding that staff are going to be monitoring this simply because the holding provision has to be lifted, and that's contingent upon the approvals coming into play. And because we have that site plan application in, there is still city work, city approvals that have to be analyzed and presented. And so staff will be monitoring what the status of those applications are and what the approvals are and whether there are any conditions that attach to them from the province.
Okay, so folks, we have heard today our concern from nearby resident about the traffic increase on Carp Road. I would like to ask by way of motion, I'm going to transfer the chair to the Vice Chair when I introduce my motion, to have a holding provision basically placed on such an application. I'm looking for such a time that the applicant complete a transportation impact assessment and review the finding of the satisfactory of staff, because Councillor Meehan asked the same question. We don't know how much impact of traffic. We know the property can have a warehouse, and warehouse can have just as many trucks, but we don't understand this application itself, how much traffic is going to do, and what's the mitigation the proponent is going to propose. And we heard it could be a signal or traffic light on Carp Road. So I want to ensure the site does not get developed until understanding to the satisfaction of staff. I want to ensure the site does not get developed until we understand fully what, if any, the traffic impact will be and what roadway modification might be required. And I heard from my president of the Huntley Community Association saying we needed that study beforehand, and I really echo that concern because we need to understand this. So I'm going to ask the Vice Chair to take the chair. I'd like to introduce the motion, and the motion read, Article 3, Zoning Bylaw Amendment, part of 2596 Carp Road, adding a holding provision until a transportation impact assessment is completed. Moved by myself, with the report recommended a zoning change to to the land known municipally as a 2596 Carp Road, and where the Huntley Community Association and property owners in the area have expressed concern with respect to traffic generated by the proposed concrete patching plan. Therefore, be it resolved that document 2 detail of recommended zoning of report section 2D in the entirely be amended to be replaced with the following text. D, the following: maximum building height for a concrete patching plant 24 meters. The holding symbol might only be removed at such a time what is demonstrated to the satisfaction of the general of planning, infrastructure, and economic development, that air, noise, and dust environmental compliance approval, which is the Vice Chair talked about, approval been obtained from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks, and to study as per city transportation impact assessment guideline considering traffic impact of the proposed concrete plan as submitted to city staff. Be it further resolved that there is no further notice pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act. So this is the, folks, this is something this committee can do, can put a provision holding to satisfy with our staff with the traffic study, and the other stuff the Vice Chair talked about, obviously in the hand of the Ministry of Environment, and we hope our staff will keep an eye on this. So this motion, boom, myself, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from committee members? Can I ask just staff and legal, this is, you've reviewed this and this is a acceptable motion?
Legal staff has reviewed it. It is an acceptable motion, and just for clarity for the committee, this means that even if the environmental approvals are granted, the holding provision will not come off and development cannot occur until the traffic impact assessment has been provided and reviewed by the city.
Thank you. On the motion as presented by Councillor El Shantiri? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So, folks, on the item 1, that the Agriculture Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for part of 2596 Carp Road to permit a concrete patching plan with an increased maximum height of 25 meters as permitted use on the subject property, and to the rezoning a portion of Huntley Creek Mander Belt as open space with allowance for continued use of an existing building as an office as detailed in document 2, and item 2 that Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approved that consultation today section. So that's one in front of us. On the item, okay. Thank you, folks. Thank you. Carrie, as amended, right, Madam Inter, as amended with the motion? That is correct. Thank you very much. Next item is a notice of motion for consideration at the subsequent meeting. None? We don't have any. Okay, thank you. Inquiries? None. Other business? None. Adjournment? So moved by the Vice Chair. Next meeting will be Thursday, April 4th, 2019. Thank you very much, and thanks to our staff for... Did we miss anything?